Welcome to Sleepy Tales. Tonight, we settle into a world of old world charm, whispered secrets, and the gentle, persistent rhythm of the rain. Before we begin, take one deep, easy breath in, hold it for a moment, and release it slowly. Now, let the world outside fade and allow yourself to be carried away to a remote English estate. And tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight, whether it's a quiet city apartment or a cozy country bedroom. Now, let us begin our journey to Blackwood Manor. Chapter 1: Introduction and Setup. The first impression of Blackwood Manor was not one of grandeur, but of profound, enveloping silence. It was the sort of silence that felt less like the absence of sound, and more like the holding of a collective breath. Hercule Poirot, meticulously wrapped in a heavy charcoal grey coat, stood on the gravel drive beneath the grand, skeletal arch of a wrought-iron gate. Above him, the sky was a sheet of heavy, bruised velvet, and a cold, steady rain was commencing its nightly ritual against the window panes of the estate. The year was 1932, a time when the world was in constant, restless motion. Yet Blackwood Manor felt stubbornly anchored in the 17th century. Poirot was not here on a case, not officially. He had accepted the invitation of his old, if somewhat tiresome, friend, Lord Harrington, merely to escape the aggressive modernity of London for a few quiet days of contemplation and perfectly brewed herbal tea. But Poirot knew, with a certainty that never failed him, that tranquillity rarely lasted long around men who kept secrets. Lord Harrington was one such man. A retired diplomat, he collected not just artifacts, but moments, small, curious objects, each with a long, convoluted history. He was also a man who had recently redrawn his will with a severity that had cast a chilling shadow over the annual family gathering. Poirot crossed the threshold into the great hall. The air here was warm and heavy, smelling of beeswax, damp wool, and the slow, comforting scent of peat smoke rising from a monstrous fireplace. In the drawing-room, the other guests had already gathered, moving in their orbits like planets slightly out of alignment. There was Lady Harrington, the second wife, beautiful and considerably younger than her husband. Tonight, she held a fragile crystal glass, watching the firelight dance in the brandy, her expression brittle. Lord Harrington was known to be planning a divorce, a move that would leave her with little more than the clothes on her back, a clear motive simmering just beneath the surface of her polite smile. Near the window, staring out at the rain, as if calculating the precise velocity of each drop, stood Dr. Alistair Finch, Lord Harrington's nephew. Alistair was a man of ambition whose medical career had collapsed under the weight of financial scandal. He had been promised a significant legacy, only to have his name systematically excluded from the new will. His presence tonight was a cold, quiet form of protest. In a deep velvet armchair sat Mr. Silas Croft, a rival collector. Croft was known for his obsessive acquisition of rare objects, including the coveted moon locket that Lord Harrington had recently acquired. He had a reputation for ruthlessness, softened only by his perfectly tailored tweed suit. He merely nodded at Poirot, his eyes dark and restless. Finally, seated at a small desk near the door, was Miss Clara Thorne, Lord Harrington's secretary of 20 years. She was the grey mouse of the gathering, unremarkable clothes, hair pulled back severely, but with eyes that missed nothing. Poirot noted the quiet tension in the set of her shoulders. She had been the primary witness to Lord Harrington's recent change of heart regarding his beneficiaries, and her continued presence seemed both essential and profoundly uneasy. The atmosphere was thick. Every polite conversation felt like the careful placement of dominoes, ready to topple at the slightest nudge. The only genuinely soothing sound was the steady tap, tap, tap of the rain against the tall, leaded windows, a perfect, hypnotic rhythm. Lord Harrington himself was conspicuously absent, having retreated to his study, a small, oak-lined fortress at the end of the west wing, promising to join them once he had finalized some tiresome paperwork. Poirot settled into a chair near the fire, observing the gentle glow of the embers. He allowed the warmth to spread through him, easing the tension in his shoulders and neck. The soft hiss of the fire seemed to speak a quiet warning. He watched the shadows lengthen and sway with the candle flames. The rain continued its mesmerizing lullaby. It was a perfect setting for a quiet evening, a perfect night for deep sleep. And yet, as the old grandfather clock in the hall began its slow, sonorous chime, striking 11, a small, cold dread settled over the manor. It was a dread that whispered that not everyone would see the morning light. Close your eyes now. Listen to the steady rain, the slow, rhythmic tick, tock of the clock, and the crackle of the fire. Let the quiet tension of Blackwood Manor become the stillness that holds you in the night. Shh, shh, shh. You are safe. You are warm, and the mystery will wait until you are fully rested. Sleep now. Chapter 2. The Crime Discovered. The grandfather clock in the hall took its time, agonizingly slow, as it advanced toward the hour of midnight. Every tick was a deliberate, heavy statement against the backdrop of the relentless November rain. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The rain, which had been a quiet accompaniment, grew heavier, drumming a more insistent, hypnotic rhythm against the glass. It sounded like countless tiny footsteps hurrying across the rooftops. In the drawing room, the conversation had long since withered into uncomfortable silences. Lady Harrington, who had been nursing her brandy, suddenly stood, the movement sharp and decisive. "It is quite too late," she announced, her voice unnaturally clear, slicing through the quiet. "Reginald promised to join us before the hour. I shall just go and remind him that his guests are waiting." Poirot noted the exact timing of her departure. 3 minutes past midnight. The little grey cells, though intended for rest, observed everything. Lady Harrington took a flickering taper lamp from the mantel and walked down the long, cold corridor of the west wing. The thick tapestries on the walls seemed to absorb her footsteps, making her journey silent. A moment later, perhaps 3 or 4 minutes, no more, a sound, sharp and out of place, echoed back to the drawing-room. A sudden, strangled cry. It was not a shriek of terror, but a single, horrified gasp, instantly muted by the heavy oak and stone. Poirot rose instantly, his slippers silent on the rug. The others followed him, their unease finally justified, their movements hesitant. They found Lady Harrington standing frozen before the door of Lord Harrington's study. The air here was noticeably colder, and the rich scent of old leather and tobacco was strangely faint. "It's locked," she whispered, her hand hovering near the brass handle. "He always leaves it open when he expects company." And there is no answer. Poirot approached the door. It was solid oak, reinforced with iron straps, a true stronghold. The locking mechanism was not a modern cylinder, but an elaborate antique mechanism requiring a specific, heavy key, a key Lord Harrington was known to wear on a chain inside his waistcoat. Poirot gently turned the handle. It was, as Lady Harrington claimed, firmly bolted from the inside. "The key, madame?" Poirot asked, his voice low. "He carries it, always," Dr. Finch interjected, his voice tight with controlled anger. "It is the only key to this specific lock, and the windows— You see the bars?" Indeed, the small, high windows of the study were protected by decorative but immensely sturdy iron bars, and they were, of course, latched from within. The study was a fortress. The air seemed to grow thick with the chilling realization no one could have entered, and no one could have left. Mr. Croft stepped forward, his collector's instinct superseding his fear. "We must break it down. He might have merely taken ill." It took the combined weight of Dr. Finch and Mr. Croft, plus the intervention of a bewildered footman, to eventually smash the antique lock, the sound of splintering wood echoing violently through the silent house, finally overpowering the gentle rhythm of the rain. They stepped inside. The study was exactly as Lord Harrington had left it. A leather chair drawn up to a massive mahogany desk, a decanter of port untouched, a manuscript spread out beneath the glow of a green-shaded banker's lamp. Lord Harrington sat peacefully in his chair, his head tilted slightly to the side, eyes closed. His face bore an expression of utter serenity, almost boredom. He appeared to have simply fallen asleep over his papers, but he was quite dead. Poirot, the small man of neat habits, performed his examination with meticulous calm. No blood, no struggle. Lord Harrington's chest rose and fell no more. As Poirot moved the green-shaded lamp closer to the victim's chest, he paused. Just beneath the silk lapel of Lord Harrington's smoking jacket, there was a minute puncture wound, the width of a hatpin, perhaps, or a very fine surgical needle. It was barely visible, and there was no bleeding, only a tiny spot of discoloration. The cause of death was instantly, terrifyingly quiet. Poirot's eyes then moved to the desk. Lord Harrington's papers were scattered, and resting beside the blotter, in its customary place, was the antique silver chain that the Lord always used for his special lock key. But the key was missing. And more importantly, the item everyone had been whispering about, the priceless, intricately carved silver locket known as the moon locket, was gone from its stand on the mantelpiece. The locket was not just a valuable object, it was the mechanism, the unique, coded key that opened the old study door. Poirot stood back, his magnificent moustaches twitching slightly. The sound of the rain continued, softer now, as if listening intently. The room was locked from the inside. The victim had died of a silent pinpoint injury, and the key to the lock, the moon locket, was nowhere to be found. He looked at the small silver keychain resting on the desk, the only thing that should have been used. "This," Poirot murmured to the empty room, his voice barely audible over the soft crackle of paper in the lamp's glow, "is a little grey cell problem of the very first order, and a very quiet one. Shh, shh, shh. The mystery is now locked inside this room with the quiet, still body of Lord Harrington. The rain outside is washing the world clean, preparing it for your rest. There is no urgency here, only the steady, deliberate movement toward the truth. Let your mind settle on the soothing sound of the study's silence. You are safe. You are warm. Drift deeper now." Chapter 3. Investigation begins. The morning arrived with a stillness even more profound than the night. The rain had ceased, leaving the manor grounds shrouded in a thick, silent blanket of November fog. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the metallic scent of wet leaves and old iron. Hercule Poirot found a small, quiet corner in the great hall, where the light, pale and diffused by the fog, fell gently onto the polished floor. He required no police presence. The isolated nature of the estate and the baffling simplicity of the crime meant that the solution lay not in forensics, but in pure, disciplined observation. His first object of attention was the destroyed door. He examined the complex antique locking mechanism, broken where the wood had splintered around the bolt. It was medieval in its design, requiring a specific, heavy object, the moon locket, to engage the internal levers. Poirot stooped, his neat black shoes barely touching the dust, and found a tiny, almost invisible detail near the bottom of the shattered lock plate. A single dark thread of velvet, snagged where the wood had been violently ripped away. The velvet was almost the exact colour of the suit worn by Mr. Silas Croft. This was the first physical clue, and perhaps the first distraction. Poirot began his interviews one by one, conducting them in the library, where the scent of aged paper and leather was deeply comforting. He started with Lady Harrington. She was dressed impeccably, but her composure was thin, stretched taut by anxiety. Her hands, when resting on the mahogany table, trembled slightly. "I was in the drawing-room the entire evening, Monsieur Poirot," she stated, her voice a low, steady monotone. "I only left to summon Reginald. I saw no one in the West Wing corridor. No servants, no guests. Only shadows." Her alibi was simple and supported by the presence of the others. Her motive, however, was massive. When Poirot gently inquired about the rumoured divorce, she admitted the financial ruin it would entail, but dismissed murder as crude and beneath her. "I am many things, monsieur, but I am not a peasant." Next was Dr. Alistair Finch. The nephew was precise and coolly furious. He did not mourn his uncle. He mourned his inheritance. "I was upstairs, sir, in my room, attempting to write a letter to my bank," Alistair confessed, his jaw tight. "A futile task, I might add, as Uncle Reginald's spite has ensured my professional ruin." Alistair was a doctor, meaning he possessed the knowledge of poisons, especially fast-acting, quiet toxins like the one implied by the tiny wound. Poirot noticed his hands, which were disproportionately large and strong, yet steady. "And the moon locket, Doctor? Did you covet that relic as well?" Alistair sneered. "A trinket, but a very expensive trinket. If I had known where he kept it, I would have taken it, yes. Better that than to see it go to charity, which was his latest vindictive plan." Poirot let the stillness of the room settle around them. The silence of the manor felt like the fabric of the mystery itself. Quiet, deceptive, and immensely deep. The investigation had begun, yielding a suspicious thread, a strong motive, and an alibi thin as tissue paper. "Shh, shh, shh. Let your attention rest now. Let the scent of old paper and the soft light of the foggy morning soothe your thoughts. The truth is hidden deep within the fabric of this quiet house. But there is time. There is only rest. Drift deeper, deeper, into the calm of the manor." Chapter 4. Clues and Red Herrings. The methodical nature of Poirot's investigation was a profoundly calming thing, like watching a skilled craftsman slowly and deliberately polish a piece of ancient silver. Everything had its place, and every piece of information must be checked for neatness and truth. Poirot turned his attention to the study itself, now cleared and sealed. He was specifically interested in the high, barred window. It looked out onto a dense rhododendron thicket, and beyond that, the old, neglected gardens. The bars were tightly fitted, making entry or exit impossible. Beneath the window, hidden behind a heavy curtain, Poirot found his first red herring. It was a small, empty glass vial, no larger than a thumb. When Poirot uncorked it, there was a faint, medicinal scent, a residual trace of a powerful, fast-acting sedative, the kind of drug a doctor might possess, the kind of drug Dr. Finch, with his troubled past and medical training, would know how to use. This clue, pointing so obviously at the nephew, was suspiciously convenient. Poirot proceeded to the second interview. Mr. Silas Croft. The rival collector was impeccably poised, but his eyes betrayed a manic intensity. "I was reading in the drawing-room, Monsieur Poirot. I never left, except to observe the dreadful smashing of the door," Croft declared, pulling his velvet jacket tighter. Poirot pointed to the stain on Croft's jacket, where the dark velvet was slightly scuffed. "The velvet thread I found snagged in the lock, monsieur. Was that not from your jacket?" Croft looked down, a thin smile touching his lips. "Ah, yes. I did lean close. Curiosity, monsieur. Pure collector's curiosity. I admit I badly wanted the moon locket. It is the missing piece in my own Asian collection. But murder, merely for an object, that is vulgar." Croft was arrogant, ruthless, and present at the scene of the crime. But the clue of the thread was too simple, too direct. Poirot moved on to Miss Clara Thorne. The secretary was a study in stillness, a person who had mastered the art of being invisible. She seemed utterly exhausted, yet she answered with mechanical precision. "Lord Harrington was quite distraught yesterday, monsieur. Not about his papers, but about his fishing rod," Miss Thorne said, her voice dry as parchment. "He sent me to the attic to find it, an old specific one, meant for trout fishing. He said he needed it for a private, small task, and would not elaborate." This was the oddest clue yet. A fishing rod? A fine, flexible trout rod, requested in the dead of November, at a moment of high tension. Poirot filed the image away. The tiny puncture wound, the locked room, the missing moon locket, and now a fishing rod. The combination made no immediate sense, yet it resonated with the impossible nature of the crime. As the fog outside began to lift, revealing the wet, grey reality of the manor, Poirot settled by the fire once more. The clues were like scattered puzzle pieces: a velvet thread, a doctor's vial, a fishing rod. They created a pattern, but the pattern was entirely false. Shh, shh, shh. The scent of peat smoke is heavy and warm. The air is quiet again. The manor holds its secrets close, wrapped in the stillness of the afternoon. Let the false clues drift away like smoke, leaving your mind clear and receptive to true rest. You have done enough for now. Let the rhythmic calm settle over you. Sink deeper into the peace of the quiet house. Chapter 5. Complications and Twists. The slow, methodical passage of time was Poirot's greatest ally. He let the suspects believe they were being investigated for a quick, brutal crime. He let them feel safe in their carefully constructed narratives. But the little grey cells worked in silence, searching for the single, tiny fault line in the facade. The first crack appeared in Mr. Silas Croft's arrogance. Poirot recalled the footman who had helped break down the study door, a nervous young man named Thomas. Poirot interviewed Thomas again, quietly, over a cup of strong, sweet tea in the butler's pantry. Mr. Croft was reading, Thomas? Yes, monsieur, except not all the time. Around 11 o'clock, sir, when the master was in his study, Mr. Croft left the room. Thomas twisted his apron nervously. I saw him head toward the west wing. He was only gone for perhaps 4 minutes. He looked quite intent. Croft's alibi, the simple one of reading in the drawing room, was a lie. Confronted gently by Poirot later in the afternoon, Croft crumbled. Not in panic, but in furious resignation. Yes, I went to the study. I confess, Croft admitted, his voice a low, throbbing growl. But not to kill. I went to steal the moon locket. I knew Harrington kept it in that room. I had a small, fine wire, a collector's tool, and I planned to try and hook the latch on the door. He paused, gathering his dramatic composure. But the door was already locked, bolted from the inside. I couldn't even get my wire near the mechanism. I heard nothing. I saw no one. After 4 minutes of futility, I returned, angry, defeated, but innocent of murder. This confession was a critical twist. It confirmed the locked room status and provided a new motive, theft, that was separate from the murder. It also eliminated Croft as the murderer. If he had truly found the door bolted, he could not have locked it from the inside after the crime. Poirot, standing alone in the study later, considered the unique locking mechanism again. He ran his hand over the old brass plate. It required the moon locket to fully engage the bolt. But why the moon locket? It was not a key, but a large decorative object. He asked Miss Thorne about the locket's purpose. The locket itself is a ceremonial piece from the Ming dynasty, monsieur. But the antique lock on the door, she explained, pointing to the damaged plate, is 17th century English. Lord Harrington modified the lock. It doesn't use a key. It uses a precise counterweight. The moon locket is the exact shape and weight required to make the internal bolt drop silently and automatically into place when the door is pulled shut. This was the key to the impossible crime. The room wasn't locked by a key, but by an object with a specific mass and shape. Poirot closed his eyes, his mind focusing on the weight, the stillness, and the object itself. The missing moon locket. The solution now lay in how that weight was both applied and removed while the door remained shut. Shh, shh, shh. The mystery is deepening, the twists turning like the mechanism of an antique clock. You feel the slow, heavy weight of the truth beginning to drop into place. But for now, let the complexities of motive and mechanism drift into the fog. Your mind deserves peace. Feel the heavy warmth of the old manor surrounding you. You are safe. Drift deeper now. Chapter 6. The Revelation. The slow, quiet process of deduction is often more soothing than the rapid flurry of activity. Poirot, having eliminated the simple explanations, now sought the elegant one. He sat by the fire, arranging his clues like pieces of coloured glass. The silent wound, a minute puncture, no struggle, suggests a silent, precise weapon, likely tipped with poison and administered by someone very close. The moon locket, the missing key, acting as a counterweight to lock the door from the inside. Its weight, its shape. This was the core of the impossibility. The fishing rod, the curious, unnecessary request for a specific, flexible trout rod requested just hours before the death. The high window, barred, small, and looking out onto the rhododendron thicket, impossible to climb through, but accessible from the outside ground level with something long and thin. The time. Lord Harrington was last seen alive around 11 p.m. The body was discovered at 12:03 a.m. Poirot picked up the tiny piece of evidence from the study, the miniature empty vial with the sedative scent, the one that pointed so strongly at Dr. Finch. A red herring of the highest quality, Poirot murmured to the fire. It directs attention to the doctor's knowledge of poisons, but it is not the means of the locked room. The solution, Poirot realized, must reconcile the external access, the fishing rod, with the internal lock, the moon locket. He returned to the high window. The distance from the glass to the heavy iron bars was narrow, perhaps 4 inches. The moon locket, when resting on the mantelpiece, was clearly visible from the window. Poirot closed his eyes and saw the scene in reverse. The murder must have happened before Lord Harrington locked the door. Imagine the scenario. Lord Harrington, working quietly, is interrupted by a soft knock. The murderer is allowed in. The silent attack is administered, the puncture wound. The murderer then leaves the room, shutting the heavy door behind them. But the moon locket, the counterweight, is still inside the study, on the desk beside the dead man. The door is simply closed, not locked. This is the moment of true elegance. The murderer used the long, thin, flexible fishing rod, the specific trout rod Lord Harrington asked for, to reach through the narrow space between the window glass and the bars. Using the bronze hook at the end of the rod, They carefully snared the moon locket from the desk and gently slid it into the special counterweight slot in the door mechanism. Click. The moon locket engaged the heavy bolt. The door was now locked from the inside. But how was the moon locket then retrieved? The murderer, having engaged the bolt, then used the same bronze hook to retrieve the locket, drawing it out of the slot and pulling it back through the narrow bars of the window, leaving the door locked from the inside, the key, the moon locket, gone. The difficulty was immense, requiring intimate knowledge of the room, the lock, and the placement of the furniture. It was a feat of quiet, steady patience. The pieces clicked into place. The murderer was someone who knew about the fishing rod, who knew the unique mechanism of the moon locket, and who possessed the nerve and precision to carry out the deadly quiet attack. Miss Thorne, the secretary. She had the knowledge, she had retrieved the fishing rod, and she had the motive Poirot had yet to fully uncover. Shh, shh, shh. The truth is often the simplest answer hidden behind the most complex execution. You have followed the logic, the patient path to the solution. Now, let the cool, crisp air of the manor enter your lungs as you breathe deeply and slowly. The revelation has been made, but the final, satisfying piece is still ahead. Relax your mind, knowing the quiet genius of the deduction process. Chapter 7. Justice Served. It was late afternoon, and the fog had lifted completely, revealing the deep blue-grey sky of approaching twilight. Poirot requested all 4 suspects, Lady Harrington, Dr. Finch, Mr. Croft, and Miss Thorne, to assemble in the drawing-room one last time. The mood was one of resigned expectation. The 4 people sat around the cooling fireplace, the only sound being the slow, hypnotic hiss of the last embers dying in the grate. Poirot, sitting in his small, precise armchair, did not launch into a dramatic accusation. Instead, he spoke calmly, his voice warm and deliberate, focusing only on the mechanics of the impossible crime. He began by dismissing the red herrings, the sedative vial, the velvet thread, even Croft's attempt at theft. All distractions, he said softly, designed by the murderer to provide cover. He spoke of the locked room, the tiny puncture wound, and the missing counterweight, the moon locket. He then described his solution to the locked room, the fishing rod. The murderer retrieved the trout rod, the precise, flexible rod Lord Harrington requested yesterday, and used the bronze hook to perform an incredible feat of patience and precision, Poirot explained. The rod reached through the high, narrow bars of the window, guided the moon locket into the locking mechanism, and then retrieved the locket, leaving the door bolted from the inside. A feat only possible by someone who knew the exact layout of the room and the unique properties of the lock. He looked gently at Miss Clara Thorne, the grey mouse of the gathering. You, Mademoiselle Thorne, possessed the knowledge of the lock's counterweight. You knew about the fishing rod because your master asked you to retrieve it. You were invisible and therefore had the opportunity. Miss Thorne's composure did not break, but the blood drained from her face, leaving it the colour of old plaster. But the means, Monsieur Poirot? The tiny puncture wound? A weapon that leaves no trace? Alistair Finch interjected, his voice shaky. Ah, the means, Poirot said, smiling faintly. It was not a hatpin, Doctor, nor a surgical needle. It was a weapon Lord Harrington himself prized. Poirot slowly revealed a plain, antique walking stick he had retrieved from Miss Thorne's small chamber. The knob unscrewed, and inside was a hollow chamber containing a spring mechanism. A simple poison dart gun, disguised as a collectible walking stick, Poirot stated, the sound of his voice now filling the silence of the room. The poison, a rare, fast-acting plant toxin known to certain diplomatic circles. Knowledge Miss Thorne gained during her 20 years as Lord Harrington's confidant. The quiet revelation was complete. The evidence of knowledge, opportunity, and means all pointed to the secretary. Miss Thorne finally spoke, her voice dry and rustling like dead leaves. He was my father, Monsieur Poirot. He refused to acknowledge me, changing his will to disinherit me and leave me with nothing but servitude. I simply claimed what was mine. The manor settled back into its silence, the confession hanging in the twilight air. The mystery was solved, not with violence, but with quiet, devastating logic. Shh, shh, shh. Let the resolution wash over you now. The tension has broken, and the truth has set the quiet house at rest. The case is closed. The rhythm of the final few embers glowing in the fireplace is the rhythm of your own restful heart. You are safe. You are warm. Let the heavy warmth of the old manor guide you down. Chapter 8. The Explanation, Part 1. The sun had finally set, and a large silvery moon, the colour of the missing moon locket, was rising over Blackwood Manor, casting long, peaceful shadows through the great hall. Poirot sat with a final cup of herbal tea, ready to offer the full, satisfying explanation. The details that allow a restful mind to close the book on the day's puzzle. The key to the impossible crime, mes amis, was not how someone entered the room, but how an item was removed from the room, leaving the lock engaged. Poirot began, his voice low and soothing. He explained the sequence of events with slow, careful precision. Miss Thorne had the perfect cover. As the long-serving secretary, she was completely invisible and had free access to the tools of the manor, including the specific trout rod. Lord Harrington, having just changed his will to exclude his illegitimate daughter, Miss Thorne, was working in his study. Miss Thorne, with her precise knowledge of his habits and his collection, knew that the antique walking stick he recently acquired contained a hidden dart mechanism, Poirot narrated. She approached him quietly. It was not a struggle. It was a devastating betrayal. She administered the single, silent dart. Lord Harrington, due to the speed of the toxin, simply tilted his head and passed away peacefully, creating the perfect illusion of a man who had fallen asleep over his work. The true genius, Poirot reiterated, was the manipulation of the lock. The murder took place sometime between 11 p.m. and the discovery. After the act, Miss Thorne calmly stepped out of the study, pulled the door almost shut, and left the moon locket resting on the edge of the desk. Then she retrieved the fishing rod from the back hall, the very rod her victim had asked for. Poirot continued. From the rhododendron thicket outside, she executed the most extraordinary piece of technical work. He described the painstaking process. The long, flexible rod slipped through the narrow bars of the high window, maneuvering the bronze hook to nudge the moon locket the final few millimeters needed to engage the heavy antique bolt. Click. The door was locked from the inside. Then, using the same hook, she gently pulled the locket back through the bars, retrieving the single necessary key to the locked room. The physical act took no more than 5 minutes, but it required the specialized knowledge of the secretary, who knew every angle, every antique, and every secret of Blackwood Manor, Poirot concluded. The motive was not simple theft, nor the panic of a wife, but the bitter, long-suppressed rage of a disinherited child. The full logic settled, quiet and complete. The impossibility vanished, leaving behind only the simple reality of the crime. Shh, shh, shh. You have heard the solution. The pieces are all in their correct, neat order. The tension is completely gone. There are no more knots to untangle, no more questions to ask. The only task remaining is to allow your body and mind to accept the final, profound rest of a mystery solved. Let the light of the full moon enter your room, gentle and silver. It is a peaceful, silent light. Chapter 9. The Explanation. Part 2. Now that the mechanism of the locked room is clear, let us spend a few moments simply allowing the full, quiet weight of the motive to settle. For in the end, the motivation is always the quiet, human heart of the mystery. Miss Thorne's life had been spent in the shadow of the man who refused to name her. She was not merely a secretary. She was a witness to his family life, his collections, his wealth, and his cruelty, all while remaining an unpaid ghost in his own house. Her bitterness was slow burning, cultivated over 20 years of loyal, invisible service. When Lord Harrington rewrote his will, explicitly cutting her out even of a minor annuity, that silence broke. The final vindictive act was the moment she transitioned from a dutiful servant to a quiet executioner. Her plan was brilliant in its subtlety. By stealing the moon locket, she not only removed the key, but also the means by which she locked the room, creating an unbreakable paradox. Her precise knowledge of the manor made the crime seem impossible to anyone else. Poirot gently emphasized the quietness of the crime. Everything was designed to appear peaceful, accidental, and utterly sealed off. The silent dart, the serene expression on the victim's face, the simple act of locking the door with a complex device. It all spoke of a need for a clean, untroubled end, both for the victim and for the story Miss Thorne intended to tell. He noted that the truly crucial clue was not the velvet thread or the doctor's vial, but the moon locket itself. It was the only item that bridged the inside world of the victim, his prized collection, and the outside world of the murderer, the retrieval mechanism. The object of value was the actual instrument of the deception. The final element was the rain and the midnight hour. The heavy, insistent drumming of the rain covered any small sound, the tiny click of the locket engaging the lock, the whisper of the fishing rod against the iron bars. The weather, which was meant to be a cozy backdrop, was in fact the murderer's silent accomplice. As the last details of the motive and means are revealed, feel the satisfaction of the full picture. The logical threads, once tangled, are now perfectly straight. There is no more doubt, only understanding. Shh, shh, shh. The manor is completely still now. The secrets are exposed, and the quietness is genuine. Allow the stillness of the house and the quiet certainty of the solved mystery to relax every muscle in your body. Your eyelids are heavy, your breathing is slow. Drift deeper, knowing that every detail has been accounted for. The mind can now rest. Chapter 10. Resolution and Good Night. The mystery is finished. Lord Harrington's quiet case is closed, and the old manor by moonlight stands peaceful and secure once more. Hercule Poirot, satisfied with the complete and elegant resolution, is preparing to depart at dawn. He leaves behind the scent of beeswax and peat smoke, and the restored silence of the house. The rain has washed the gravel drive clean, and the air is crisp with the promise of a quiet, clear day. You have journeyed through the tension of a locked room, navigated red herrings, and listened patiently until the final logical piece fell into place. Now it is time for the final, deep rest. Take a moment to feel the blanket or duvet around you. It is warm, comforting, and heavy. Feel the weight of your head sinking into the pillow. Let the thoughts of the day and the details of the mystery drift away like the fog of the early morning. We are finished with thinking. We are finished with listening. There is only the long, calm expanse of the night ahead. Remember the quiet rhythm, the gentle hiss of the fire, the slow tick, tock of the hall clock and the steady, heavy shh of the manor settling down for the night. I want to wish you the deepest and most peaceful sleep. Thank you for joining me tonight on this journey to Blackwood Manor. You are safe. You are warm. You are utterly at rest. Good night. Sleep well.